Okay, new semester, new year. This is chapter one. We're going to tackle right now. You've seen the requirements for the class. There will be a discussion each for each chapter, and also there is a chapter quiz, and that's it. And the paper. The idea of the paper is for you to write on something that you find interesting from this textbook or from the class, something that I mentioned or whatever. So that's the idea behind the paper. It's supposed to be an AP. It should be an APA format. We will be dealing with APA format all semester, so I'll try to guide you in that direction. I'll try not to be too critical, since you're probably novices to APA. Well, you probably did APA with 111, and some of the other classes that you've taken, I'm sure they use the APA format. So we'll go over that eventually. There is a video from Professor Barber that deals with how the APA format is working right now. They change it from time to time. When I first started in psychology back in, well, when I first got really serious about psychology back in about 2000, we were in, which one? We were in APA 4, um, and it didn't take very long for them to switch to APA 5. Then they changed to APA 7, 6, and now we're in APA 7. So the interesting thing is all the manuals are a different color. Uh, the the current one is several different colors. It's actually three, four different colors. But the APA 4 was maroon, and APA 5 was black, and APA 6 was blue. So it's kind of funny that they keep changing the colors so that you know which one you're dealing with. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, okay, so this is chapter one. We're not going to get through the whole thing today. I'll tackle half of it today and then half of it next week. So let's go ahead and get started, I guess. Okay, maybe. There we go. Okay. So we're going to talk about how and why we study human development. Important topic. Um, One of the things we do is we look at development from a time aspect. We look at it from conception to birth, what happens while the individual is in the womb. Then we look at it the very one of the very the most important times in your life is when the baby is brand new. It's a neonate. That's the from birth to the first month. This is my daughter and her son. That's Reese right there, little Reese, and that's the father. Um, okay, there's Reese at about a year old. You can see he was the happiest kid you ever saw. He the only time he ever cried was when he sometimes he'd wake up crying, but the rest of the time he was a pretty good kid. He's a pretty happy fella. There he is, smiling again, carrying around his uncle's empty Coke can. As you can see, if you've read my biography, you know that I am from Indiana, and my brother is an Indianapolis Colts fan. That's a Colts football and a Colts uh, beach towel. There's a young guy dip. This is when McDonald's allowed you to take as much ketchup as you wanted. He decided he would get himself a puddle of ketchup to dip his French fries in. There you go. He used to live in Florida. Now he lives with us up here in Iowa. Okay, there he is. I don't know. He's 4 or 5 years old. Just the cutest thing in the world. Decided um, he got himself a Happy Meal, but he wanted a hat like you get at Burger King. So he decided he'd make himself his own hat. And as you can see, he's got one. There he is. This is the latest picture of him. This is him running in the Santa Run, the famous Davenport Santa Run. He ran as a polar bear. You could either be an elf, a polar bear, or a Santa Claus, and he decided he wanted to be a polar bear. So when you signed up, you got this shirt, and they gave you a hat that fit your character. And of course, his is a polar bear, so he got gloves that went along with it. As you can see, they're hanging there. That's the last picture since he's 9 years old right now. Adolescence, 12 to 20 years old. Young adulthood, 20 to 40 years old. Middle-aged adult, 40 to 60 years old. Young old adult, as strange as that may seem, 60 to 80 years. And finally, the old is older than 80 years old. So that's the last thing you're hitting. I'm here. I'm 72 years old, so I'm young old. I don't look like this guy though. I do wear a hat sometimes. And there you go. When you get older, it's things you start losing things. Your ears keep growing. Your nose keeps growing. As interesting as that is. Uh, Diversity of human development. Human development encompasses many different fields. It encompasses genetics, molecular biology, neuroscience, nutrition, embryology, medicine, computer science, cognitive science, psychology, sociology, gerontology, epidemiology. Of course, this is real important right now since we're going through a fourth surge with the Omicron variant. I don't know if you remember when it first started. And when we first started talking about Omicron, it was like 3 weeks ago, and all of a sudden it's taken over the entire world. These viral problems, these viral infections, they mutate very, very rapidly. Usually they mutate to a weaker form, but from time to time they will mutate to a more virulent form. And that's what happened with the beta variant. If you remember when it first came over from China, um, it wasn't too bad. There were only select individuals that were really susceptible to it. Uh, some of those people were the older were the old, and then it got into New York City. Then it became the beta variant that came over from England, and that was fairly devastating. Then the Delta variant developed in India, and it came over, and it swept through the United States, killing a very high number. And now we have the Omicron variant, which doesn't seem to be quite as virulent, but it is more infectious. In other words, more people are getting it. It's more transmissible. So we'll just have to see what happens. I have a feeling we're not done with the Omicron, with COVID. We're going to be dealing with COVID for a while until it burns itself out. They talked about the flu, the Spanish flu of 1918, 1919. It only lasted for about 18 months. And then it burned itself out because it had infected so many people. But COVID is different. COVID continues to mutate. And since we have so many people that have refused to get vaccinated, one of the problems we're having is this herd immunity that they're talking about, a lot of herd immunity has to do with vaccination. If we can get that to happen, otherwise they need to be infected. But people don't seem to be building up very much resistance to this disease when they are sick. We have people that have been sick at least twice, and that's one of the reasons why this is such a deadly virus. This is more deadly than anything that we've seen up to this point. The Spanish flu killed about 600,000, well, 6,500, 650,000 Americans. This is the COVID is close to a million now at this point. It's over 800,000 deaths from COVID. Of course, it's been going on a little bit longer than the flu did, but it's really devastating. Well, it's changing the way that we teach. It's changing schools. It's changing everything. And we're starting to have supply problems. So we'll see what happens. I say that a lot, and you're going to hear that a lot. We'll see what happens. That usually has to do with something that's ongoing, and we're not exactly sure how it's going to end up. That happens a lot. Cultural studies, of course, different cultures. There are lots of different cultures out there, including the Navajo culture, the Dene culture, and other indigenous peoples around the world. Anthropology is another area that is looked at through development. Philosophy, you have to add that in as well. Theology, you can't discount spirituality and how spirituality uh, molds cultures and groups. Linguistics, trying to communicate between groups. I made the mistake the other day. I was talking about. I was in a Zoom meeting, and this lady was in the meeting, and she was in southern Arizona, and she had on a I'm up here where it's very, very cold, and she didn't have as much on, nearly as much as I did. And I said, "You look hot," because she was sweating, and of course I used the word hot, and I hope she didn't take it incorrectly. I meant that she looked overly warm, but you can take that more than one way, unfortunately. So I may have made a mistake. I hope I didn't. I hope she didn't take it incorrectly. So when we're talking about linguistics, we're talking not only talking about the words that you use, but how the words are accepted by the other person. And of course, that would be the problem. I meant that she looked overly hot. If she thought that I meant that she looked um, sexual in any way, then she misinterpreted what I said. But of course, that's what words are for. When I say something, it's the way you take them that's the communication between the two of us. And if I'm using a word that you see in a different way, then we aren't communicating properly. Economics, of course, that's monopoly. History, I find history very important. I think it's really important to understand what people are thinking at the time. So if you don't understand history, you don't understand Vietnam, you don't understand 9/11, you don't understand the insurrection on the 6th of January of last year. If you don't understand these things are taking place, then you don't understand what people are thinking at the time. So when they write something, when they try to communicate with with history, then people are misinterpreting what's going on. Culture, the total pattern of groups this is a definition of culture. It's the total pattern of a group's customs, beliefs, art, and technology. Uh, Total fertility rate in a population, the number of births per women, that is the total fertility rate. In developed countries, most affluent countries in the world, about 18% of the total world has about 18% of the world population, which means there is 82% of the world's population that aren't in developed countries. Developing countries, less wealth than the developed countries, of course. They represent about 82% of the world's population. So you can imagine how negative this might be considered. This is an Earth Mother figurine from, I'm not exactly sure where it's from, but as you can see, it's an Earth. She's fairly obese. The reason she's obese is because she is a new mother, or the idea is that she is the quintessential mother, and they would worship these Earth Mother figures because they are the givers of life. So if you go back 17, 18, 20,000 years ago, they were carving these figurines, and you can find them from time to time and from place to place. They represent birth. Two reasons the United States follows a different demographic path. Total fertility rate is higher than most developed countries. United States allows more legal immigration than most developed countries, and also has millions of undocumented immigrants. So we have our demographics are a little bit different. So we just had a census. My wife actually worked for the Census Bureau, counting people in this area of Iowa. The idea wasn't that we're only counting people that are citizens of the United States. The idea is that we were counting everybody in the United States, whether they were documented, undocumented, whether they were aliens that are documented or undocumented or not, and of course, citizens of the United States. But the idea is to find out exactly how many people are here. From those figures, then we can create representation. There's about 475 people in Congress, in the House of Representatives, and the number of representatives that your area gets has to do with how many people are actually living in your state. That isn't the number of citizens in your state, that is the number of total people in your state. So the immigrants, legal and undocumented, are also theoretically counted if you can find them. And of course, not everybody wanted to be counted. It was really kind of interesting. People who were citizens of the United States refused to be counted for some strange, odd idea that they were trying to take their guns away or something. As weird as some people get. The conspiracy theories in the United States are kind of amazing sometimes. The projected ethnic changes in the United States population in 2050, as you can see, in 2010, there were 65% of the population were white. 16% were Latino, 12% were African American, and here you guys are. You're this green line right here. In 2050, it's projected that only less than half of the population will be white in the United States. 30% will be Latino, 12% will still be African American, 8% will be Asian American, and then the other population will go up to 4%. Excuse me. 40% of the world's population lives on less than $2 per day. 80% of the world's population lives on a family income of less than $6,000 per year. In developed countries, 50% go on to tertiary education. Secondary education is high school. tertiary education is beyond high school. So 50% of the population in developed countries go on to more education after high school. In developing countries, about 20% of the children don't complete primary school. Individualistic cultural values such as independence and self expression, collectivistic cultural values such as obedience and group harmony. These two are in contrast to one another. So some countries are individualistic, some countries are collectivistic. In traditional cultures, rural culture that adheres more closely to historical traditions than urban people, globalization, increasing connections between different parts of the world. And of course, this is one of the things that we're seeing. Everyone has COVID. It's all over the world. There are no places in the world where there is no COVID. It is that contagious that it has reached every corner of the globe. But globalization has to do with making a product in Taiwan, and the for a company that is owned by a German, and then the German transports it to the United States on a Panamanian ship, and it comes to the United States, and it is sold by Walmart. That's what globalization is all about. Globalization has to do with someone in Arkansas deciding that they need a new type of television set. They make the television set in Taiwan. Um, the individual that is contracted to do that is a German company. They ship it over to us in the United States on a freighter that is owned by the Panamanians, and then it makes its way to Walmart. And who knows what it says on there? It probably says, Hopefully, it says it's made in Taiwan. The worldwide variations in population and income levels, as you can see, the developing countries, there are very many developing countries. Europe is developed, of course, the United States, North America, Mexico, Canada, the United States, Australia, Japan. This is South Korea, is a developed country, and everything else is developing. As you can see, this is Central America. That's the islands that's Cuba and Puerto Rico. That's Chile, is a developed country according to this. There's New Zealand over here. This is Turkey, and that is Greece. So all the other countries are developing. 18% of the world's population lives in developed countries. Majority culture sets norms and standards. The majority culture in the United States is the white culture. It's not just because they do something in Virginia doesn't mean that the people in Iowa are going to do exactly the same thing. So the culture is varying by region, of course. Context or settings and circumstances. Socioeconomic status is your social class, including your educational level, your income level, and occupational status. Your gender is your expectations of male and female roles. Gender, of course, has lots of different definitions now. Once upon a time, it was very simple. Not nearly as simple now as we become more diversified in the United States. There are transgender people, there are gay people, and people who don't accept any identification as either male or female. And of course, we have to respect their idea of who they are. Ethnicity is your cultural origin and traditions, your race, your religion, and your language. Developed countries represent only 18% of the world population, yet they are much wealthier than developing countries. At what point in its economic development should a developing country be reclassified as a developed country? And an argument that is going on a continual basis. Uh, we know, the developed countries, they own about 55.4% of the world's gross domestic product. They produce about 55.4%. In developing countries, almost all of South America, all of Africa, most of Asia, uh, they they don't produce as much as the developing countries. One of the major arguments in psychology and biology are genes more important in dictating behavior than the environment within which someone grows up? The nature versus nurture debate, it's one that is continual. Most people will say, no, it's not nature, no, it's not nurture, it's both. And the reality is that you are correct. It is both. It's kind of silly to argue to separate the two because you can't separate the two. You have to grow up somewhere, and you've got whatever genes that you've got, and you're never going to be able to change them. Continuity is the continuous, smooth progression of a developmental phenomenon across a lifespan, such as friendship that starts in Head Start and lasts into adulthood. So that's continuous. There is continuity in development. Discontinuity is where there are abrupt shifts in development. Puberty and sexual maturation is such a discontinuity. While people grow from infancy to puberty, the change in adulthood tends to be fairly abrupt. And all of you are adults, of course, so all of you have recognized this. I hope it wasn't too traumatic for you as you were going through puberty, but it is a fairly abrupt thing. Universality refers to the same things happening to everyone at the same time and in the same way. Puberty hits everyone at about the same time. The ability to learn hits everyone around age 5 or 6 and lasts a lifetime, of course. Your ability to learn things. I'm still learning things. I read a lot of different magazines and I find out a lot of different things. Maybe I don't remember them like I used to, but I, I do okay. So here we have a classroom in Japan. These are 5-year-olds, and these are 5-year-olds in the United States. 5 and 6-year-olds. Everyone starts learning about the same time. So no matter what the situation is, whether you're in China, whether you're in Japan, whether you're in Europe or in Russia or in Africa, the educational system starts about age 5 or 6. And there is I don't know, these look like 8 or 9-year-olds. We don't have these are people from the past, of course. And there we go. Class of this is June 1967. PS 32 in Queens, New York. As we can see, there's a little bit more diversity in this group than there is in this group. This is from the 1950s. And whoops, this is from the 1960s. As you can see, there's a lot more diversity in this group than in that group. Education in the United States for a very long time, especially in the South, was segregated, became integrated. Of course, in the North, it wasn't nearly as integrated. Whoops, I'm sorry. It wasn't nearly as integrated. Segregated as it was in the South. This is in New York City, of course. Queens is in New York City. And as you can see, there's a lot of diversity here in this class. I'm not sure where I go up with that. Oh, there's the Brecksville High School. And there's a graduating class, senior class in 1959. You can see that the styles are different. Hairstyles are different for both males and females. Everyone has on skirts that go down past their knee, well past their knees, halfway down their calf. They're all about the same light. As interesting as that is, they're all standing. This guy's got his arms crossed. He's kind of upset, I guess. And so does he. He's got his arms crossed too. He's got certainly an interesting hairstyle. Anyway, there you go. You can see the differences in haircuts and hairstyles through the ages, I guess. Brecksville is in Ohio, so there you go. This is Mrs. Peoples' class of 1959. All of these people were born about 1940, a little, yeah, right after World War II started, 1941. Many of them are probably no longer with us. They have probably died since they are in their 80s, or would be in their 80s. And I don't remember why I have this picture. Anyway, there's Magic Mike. I don't remember why I put this in here. It had something to do with this picture. I can't remember. Okay, anyway, Magic Mike. And there's a group, college students from not too long ago, I guess. You can see the hairstyles are a little bit different. Everybody has on sandals. This guy's got on sandals. She's got on sandals. She's got on sandals. I don't know where they are. Okay. Context specific development refers to the fact that differences in people may have to do with the environment in which they develop. This theory purports that there is a complex, intricate interaction between the individual and their environment that may change the outcome. When I was growing up, I grew up in an area that was a farming area, but there were a lot of factories around us. So half the kids I went to school with were farmers, and the other half were uh, factory workers' kids. And I can assure you the two weren't the same. I was talking to my wife the other day. It was really kind of interesting because farmers get paid once or twice a year. They can sell cattle, I guess. If they've got cattle, they can sell cattle, but otherwise, the only time they really get paid is when they sell their crops. So they get paid once a year. Factory workers get paid or back then they got paid every week. So you can tell the difference between a farmer's kid and a factory worker's kid. They may the two may have made about the same amount of money through the year, but the factory workers' kids always wore clothes that were really sturdy, that didn't wear out, and if they did wear out, of course, they didn't replace them until the next fall because the next fall is when the next harvest was. The factory workers' kids, of course, they got money every week, so they tended to buy flimsier clothes, but they had um, more clothes, so they had more variety in what they wore. It's really kind of interesting. It was an interesting time to grow up. I grew up. I'm 72 years old, so I started school in 1955. Started grade school, and really kind of interesting. This is something that I noticed. The other thing was that I came from a large family, and farmers they buy sturdy clothes, as I said. So a lot of times the kids would grow out of them before they wore out. So they used to give them away, and so I got a lot of hand-me-downs from our neighbors who were farmers. But and the reason that happened is because their clothes were very sturdy, or relatively sturdy. You know, a lot of jeans, a lot of heavy cotton shirts. So I got a lot of hand-me-downs from our neighbors. As curious as that is, the factory workers, of course, they got paid every week. So if one of the kids needed a new pair of shoes, they just waited until Friday, and then they got a new pair of shoes. Really kind of curious time. Factors of affluenza. Affluenza. This individual claimed that he killed somebody. He was driving drunk. He was underage. He was driving drunk, and he killed somebody. And his parents were trying to say it wasn't his fault because he had affluenza. In other words, he was affluent and he grew up in this environment and he got everything that he wanted, so he didn't understand consequences. That was the idea. Now, this is a really interesting case because this individual, this mother, took this boy to Mexico so that he wouldn't be arrested and arraigned. And eventually he came back and they tried him and found him guilty, despite the fact that he grew up rich. But because he grew up rich, she was able to spirit him out of the country. And he was missing for about 18 months down in Mexico, living the high life down in Mexico. But when he came back, he paid the piper for his crimes. I don't know if he's still in jail. I don't remember his name actually, but it was really kind of interesting. His defense was that he had grown up affluent and he didn't understand consequences. And they didn't blame the parents. You'd think, well, geez, if it was like that, that he should, then the parents should be punished. But of course, that's not what happened. You don't do that to rich parents, I guess. Scientists feel that there are four interactive forces influencing the way that an individual is going to turn out. They're biological forces, the psychological forces, the sociocultural forces, and life cycle forces. So if you are an infant, of course, you're not going to go to college. That's not going to happen. The life cycle, your time, uh, tells you that you're not ready for it yet. If you're 72 years old, you know that you're not going to go into the military. Why? Because 72-year-olds usually are too infirm to be able to handle the rigors of military life. So all of these things have to do with, they all come together to tell us what we can do and what we can't do. Biological forces, these forces include genetic factors such as height, weight, longevity, sensitivity to environmental factors. I grew up in Indiana where basketball is king, and has been for as long as I've been alive anyway. And I always wanted to play center on the basketball team. That was my favorite position. Well, I'm only 5'7", so that wasn't going to happen. Genetically, my height told me that that wasn't going to happen. I was kind of skinny, so I'd get knocked around under there. But I've lived a long time. I'm 72 years old. And I'm not very sensitive to environmental factors. I don't have any allergies. So my genetic factors have told me that I can't play center on the basketball team, and my weight, of course. But one of the things that a lot that like, okay, so I couldn't play center on the basketball team, but because I was fairly slender and because I was, well, my height didn't have anything to do with it. But I've been running for much of my life, and I was a fairly good runner when I was in high school and college. Um, and I still hold records at 72. I still hold records from my college and high school days. And I've won a trophy in every decade of my life. As interesting as that is, I looked at this the other day. So even though I'm old as dirt, I still have trophies from every decade I've lived. Health-related factors such as being exposed to different pathogens or the consumption of toxins, and of course we do this because our culture tells us to, or the environment we live in tells us to consume alcohol or tobacco or drugs. And of course that can be a problem. It can deplete your immune system, and you may die a lot sooner. I had a good friend when I was in the military who was a smoker, and we communicated for an extended length of time. And when I was in 2010, I had a heart attack. I had a heart attack, and I had 93% occlusion in one of my blood vessels in my heart. And of course, I had surgery, and everything was fine. Didn't have any damage done. My friend who smoked had the same heart attack I did about 5 years ago, and he had only 87% occlusion, but he never recovered from his heart attack. He died from the heart attack. He was unconscious, went into a coma, was unconscious, and he died. And the main reason that I'm alive and he's dead is because of that reason right there. He was a big smoker. He was also a drinker, and I wasn't. Um, but he did a lot of things he probably shouldn't have done, and now he's gone, and I'm not. So, and I'm still able to teach. I hope you guys can decide whether I should retire or not. Right now, I've got a little congestion going on, but I don't think it's a cold, and I'm not. I know it's not COVID. I don't have a fever or anything, so it's just a little bit of congestion because where I live right now, it's we've got a wind chill factor in the negatives, -27, I guess, last night. But I went out in it to see if we could bust through the driveway. A lot of wind, we got 6 to 10 inches of snow the other on Saturday. So I went out to see if we could bust our way through, and we did. We were able to bust through. I could probably get through right now. I've got a four-wheel drive pickup truck, so I'm it's a little bit jacked up, not very jacked up, but enough. I've got the clearance to get out of here. I think if an emergency came up. But I went outside. My point is, I went outside, and since the wind chill was so bad, and I had to face the wind to walk down the driveway, and I think I got a little bit too much cold wind blowing in my nose, and that's why I have the congestion. How about that for rationalization? Psychological forces. These forces include the way that we see the world, our perception, it includes our cognitive capacity, our intelligence. It includes our personality and the emotions that we bring to our interpretation of the world. One of the things that we will be telling you in psychology is that positive, well, we we support positive psychology. So the idea is not to focus on negative things, but to focus on positive things, to focus on the positive. If you've got a mental illness, of course, that's a problem, but we need to focus on the positive. So rather than focusing on the negative, the mental illness, we will try to focus on your resilience and your ability to get through the day. And that, of course, has to do with your personality. One of the things that you're going to find out about me is that I laugh a lot, and I find a lot of things funny. So I try to stay as positive as I possibly can. Not a bad idea. Sociocultural influences, the sociocultural forces involve the world and the people around us, influencing how we develop our culture, the society that we live in, and our ethnic factors. And of course, living on the Navajo Nation, you can see that these are in play all the time as far as you are concerned. Um, and me, not so much, because I don't interact nearly as much with the people around me as you guys do, as you guys interact with each other. Life cycle forces, people change as they age. Life cycle forces will have different influences at different times of a person's life. For example, a pregnant teen will have different concerns than a woman who is pregnant in her 40s. And this is a woman pregnant in her 40s, and this is a woman that's pregnant in her teens. She looks really pretty happy about her baby. She's got her shirt pulled up and she's showing off her big gut, her pregnant belly. This is her. I'm hoping that is the father of the baby, but you can see he's just a kid drinking a beer with his Cubs hat on. Trust me, blondes are more fun. Yeah, that's what his shirt says. So he's trying to. Okay. This is really kind of interesting. He's a rodeo rider, so he's got his belt buckle. He's showing off his belt buckle. Not exactly sure what if he could stay on a bull, but he's pretty skinny. Anyway, it's a really interesting picture. Just find this fascinating. And she's in her 40s and she's pregnant. So her idea, she has to worry about her baby and Down syndrome, of course, because she's older. He's older. He's pretty happy with himself. You see, the males are pretty happy with themselves. Not sure she's that happy with him. Anyway, there we go. Let's stop this right here, and we will take this up next week and talk more about all this fun stuff, belt buckles and cub hats and whatnot. So I'll see you next week if I can get out of here. There we go.